Hey guys, welcome back. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than my shorter 5-minute design videos. We're going to be going a little bit more in depth, and I want to give you a better look at my design process and how I would handle a project in a real world situation. So to do that, we're going to be designing some packaging for Pancake Mix. I absolutely love pancakes, and I think this will be a really fun project. So let's get started. So this is what our packaging looks like. It's in a bag instead of a box, and we're going to be designing both the front and the back of this. So let's start out with the front. So normally for a project like this, we'd receive some type of design brief, and that would include all the assets and information that the client wants on the packaging, as well as their branding assets and a general description of what they're trying to go for. So our client is old timers, and this is their logo. You can tell it has a very old-fashioned feel, and that's the mood that they like to bring out in their products. High quality, natural products, just like in the old days. And so we want to make sure that our packaging design pulls from these elements of the brand. Now normally with this type of project, your client's going to send you some type of template that has an unfolded version of the packaging. And ultimately, your final design will be on top of this template. And you can certainly design straight over top of that template, but honestly, I find it so much easier to design on top of a mock-up rather than a template. So if you can get an accurate mock-up, I highly recommend that. As you're laying out the design and placing different assets, it's just so much easier to get an idea of what the real world product's gonna look like. Plus, a mock-up can help you see where seams and folds occur, and that'll help you make more informed decisions on appropriate layouts and where you may or may not want to put different elements. Now, as for the information that's gonna be on the package, this is what our client wants. They want the words Pancake Mix to be the focus, obviously. And this mix is also organic, so we want to feature that somewhere. And they want to let people know how many pancakes they can expect from this bag of mix. And finally, just some required information about the weight of the product. Each of these pieces of text has a different level of importance, so that hierarchy is going to determine the placement and the size of each of these elements on our package. And with that in mind, we can start coming up with some concepts. I made a few copies of our bag, and that'll let us try out some different concepts and compare them side by side. So right now, we want to focus on the main visual for the package. Since this is Pancake Mix, obviously our graphics are going to revolve around pancakes. The first idea that likely comes to your mind is just to stick a stack of pancakes on there. A lot of other pancake mix brands do that. They focus on a really good looking stack of pancakes, and that's supposed to draw you in. That's what this first idea is going to represent, and I'm really just using some free icons to illustrate this stuff. I do that a lot when I'm designing, and it's a good way to just visually lay things out. Now this pancake stack is from a side view, so maybe we could try something from a top view instead. Just like this. Simple stack of pancakes, we can see some butter and some syrup running off of it, and it gives us a different view than we normally see on most of these types of packages. But you know, you don't always want to go with your first ideas, because a lot of times they're just going to be generic. We want to try to take some of these concepts that maybe we've seen before and push them further, make them different in some way. So following this line of thought, maybe it would be cool to not just show only the pancake, but also have it in a pan, just like this. And I'm really drawn to this idea because it shows us the process of the food actually being prepared, and that's what the mix is all about. It's about making pancakes. So let's get rid of these other ideas that we're not going to use and see if we can develop this one a little more. So I'll just duplicate that so we can do some adjustments. I like this as our central visual, but I do think it's going to need to be a bit larger on the package just to make that visual impact. We can see that pancake a lot better now, but remember, we need to put our words Pancake Mix somewhere on the package, and it needs to be fairly large. I'm afraid with this type of setup, we don't necessarily have the room to do that. So maybe we could find some way to incorporate the words Pancake Mix into our main visual. What if we got rid of the pancakes in the pan and instead replaced it with our text Pancake Mix, but make it look like the text is actually made out of pancakes. Kind of like pancake art, if you've ever seen that before, where people take pancake mix and they do different designs and even drawings and stuff with them. It's pretty cool, and I think we could play off that idea. Something kind of like this, except the text would look like it's made out of pancake batter. I think I like this concept. I feel like it's a little more unique than some of the other packaging out there. It should help us stand out, and that's what we're going to roll with. So now that we've got some idea of our visual concept, we should probably go ahead and start thinking about where we're going to place these other items on the package before we get too into the nitty-gritty. So it makes sense for our logo to go somewhere at the top of the bag. Realistically, besides the middle, that's the most prominent position, and it's a pretty common spot to put a brand, so people should be able to find that easily. We've already got our word Pancake Mix in there. So as for the organic and the pancake count, realistically, both of these items fall into the category of supporting information. They're not necessarily core to the product, but they can help people make an informed buying decision. So that means they need to be legible and in easy to find places, but they don't have to take up a whole lot of visual space. I think we could place both of those items down in the corner of the package. It gives us some nice visual balance. And a lot of times people expect to find extra information down towards the bottom of something. Finally, our packaging weight will probably just go somewhere right in the middle, and we'll just have to make sure that's legible in the final design. So I think this is a pretty nice layout. The hierarchy seems right to me. The first thing you're going to notice is this big Pancake Mix text, then the logo is clearly visible. You got some extra info down here to give you some more clarity about the product, and then our required text is visible, and it doesn't really get in the way of anything else. So let's go ahead and tackle our main focal point first and try to find an image for our pan. So I almost always get all of my images from Adobe stock. They've got a great collection of images, and I can usually always find what I need. For a pan graphic, I'd like to get something really rustic, so maybe something like a cast iron pan. So you can see we've got a ton of options. The main things I'm looking for are that it's easy to cut out from the background if it needs to be, and that the lighting in the photo matches the lighting we're going for in our design. When I find an option that I think will work, a lot of times I just download a preview image of that, and I'll actually place that into the design just to get a feel for it. So for example, just to try out this pan, I would quickly remove the background and place that into position. And almost every time I'll try out multiple images just to see what I like better. So I found a couple more images I liked. This was the original one, this is a different version, and this is the third one. Now I like how dark and rich this one looks. The only problem is it looks like the lighting is coming from this direction, and that's not really what I want. I'd rather the light be coming down from the top this way. So this one's probably a no-go. Now between these two pans, I feel like this one is almost a little too deep, and it still kind of looks like the lighting isn't coming from exactly the direction that I'd like. Whereas this one has a nice even lighting. It looks like that light's shining down from the top. It's a little more shallow, and I think that'll play better with our scene. So this is the one we're gonna go with. Now I can just license that image, and that'll give me a full resolution version without the watermark. And first off, we just need to remove that white background from this. What I normally do to do that is to scale this up really large, much larger than we need, convert it to a smart object, and then scale it back down. And what that does is make our smart object a lot larger resolution than we actually need in our design. I find that that's especially helpful when you have to remove backgrounds, because even if you do have a little bit of a rough cutout on your object inside the smart object, since that object gets shrunken down in the actual design, it hides a lot of those imperfections. Anytime I'm cutting out an object, I always make a bottom layer that's a really vibrant color that doesn't match the actual object color. And so if we select the white, just with the magic wand tool, mask that, we can easily see the blue coming through underneath, and a lot of times that'll help you spot any areas that you meant to mask but you may have missed. In addition to that layer, a lot of times I'll add a solid black layer, and that'll help you check for any white haloing around your object. And now we just hide those background layers, save it, and our pan is ready to go. So we'll just drag that in place, get rid of our temporary pan behind it, and that's pretty much got it. Now, I think we should try to get that pancake text in. I'm gonna start by putting in our text in separate words. And I'd like them to look like they fit the pan pretty well, so we're probably gonna make this mix a bit bigger. And that really helps fill in the space. Now we just need to find a font that looks like hand-drawn pancake text. And when you're trying to find fonts, there's so many places online that you can look, and it's really just a game of searching to find the ones that you like. And this is the one I think I'm gonna settle on. It's called Heartbreaker. It's got some nice personality. It looks kind of liquidy, and that's exactly what we want. We want it to feel handmade. So I'm just gonna rearrange this to fill up some more space. We want the mix to be really large, because that realistically is the product. The pancake can be smaller. This feels very square to me, and I'd like this pancake to fit a little more into this curve. So to do that, we can convert that into a smart object and use the liquify filter. So now we can just push and pull that text so it'll fit better around that curve. Make the brush really big and just kind of drag that up. All right, perfect. So that definitely fits that curve a lot better now. I'm gonna adjust the top of this mix just a little bit. That way these letters aren't so close to each other. So I did that, and I also add a little more space between the M and the I. Both those letters were too close without actually touching. Now we can drop in the image of our batter. We'll go ahead and remove the areas of this image we don't need, like the pan and the background. So we start by taking this and making it a clipping mask for our mix text. We'll shrink down the texture some, get it in a position that we like. And then we can just duplicate it, drag it over to our other areas, and mask out that seam with a soft brush. And you can see we have some repeating patterns here which we don't necessarily want. We can duplicate that texture again and then just mask out those areas. This side seems a little plain, so I'm just gonna make a hole in our M, maybe even one in our X over here, take a little chunk out of it. Now we're gonna do the same thing to our pancake text. So this looks very flat right now, and obviously pancake batter is not flat. So what we wanna do is add some depth to this. And we can do that with some bevel and emboss. And by adjusting these sliders, we can make it look like it's actually mounds of pancake batter. And so this has added highlights and shadows to our text. And anytime you're lighting any object, you almost never want completely white highlights and completely black shadows. The color of the lighting and shadow is affected by the color of the object. So in this case, we want our highlights to be a really light brown, and we want our shadows to be a dark brown. Now what's cool is if we apply any changes to our text, that bevel and emboss filter will apply over top of that. So for example, if I mask out this part of the A, it still gives us that nice 3D effect. I think we probably need to clean up some of these spotty areas, and I'm just gonna do that with a healing brush. And now I'm just gonna add a drop shadow to this text, and that'll really help it ground it in the scene. And our shadow is gonna be a really dark blue color to match the pan. We don't want the shadow to be too hard or too soft. We want it somewhere in the middle. And since this pancake batter is fairly shallow, the shadow is not gonna be super long. And I imagine this word being a little bit thicker, so the shadows are gonna come out more. So you can see what a massive difference those shadows make. So I think we can go ahead and put our logo in. I'm actually gonna change that to a white color instead of this brown. Now we've got that black and white. And if we set that blending mode to screen, it'll make any of the black parts of the logo transparent. Notice it's okay to put the logo behind the pan in this situation because the pan isn't covering up any important part of the logo. Now we can go ahead and turn our attention to these two blocks of information. We've set them up in this symmetrical way, and so it makes sense to me that each of these should look visually very similar, but you have certain elements that set them apart, so each one has its own identity. So I'm just gonna hop into Illustrator. We're gonna see what we can come up with. We'll start with the 100% organic text. Just as part of their brand, a lot of clients have specific fonts that they use throughout all of their materials, and many times those font choices are a reflection of the fonts used in their logo. For this client, we have two different types of fonts, this tall bold one and this more flat serif one. So I think we can go ahead and make our organic text the same bold font used in here. Now to help this information act as a unit, I think we need some type of container around it. So if you look at our original logo, we've got this solid background and this thin outline that goes around that. So I think we can mirror that and make a container for our 100% organic text. I'm just gonna use a circle as the base, make our text white so we can see it, and then we'll duplicate that circle and make it just an outline instead. And now we've got something that pretty clearly resembles this. I don't think our text is filling in the space inside the circle very well though, so I think we should go ahead and make this 100% a little larger. Go ahead and shrink this down some. I think what we could use here is some type of icon to really help drive this organic point home. So I actually found this icon of a leaf online, and keep in mind, in real world projects, you don't always have to make everything completely custom. If you want to use an already created icon, it's perfectly fine to do that as long as you have the rights to use it. So this leaf icon gives us a nice visual to tie into our organic message. So I'm just going to turn that black, shrink it down a little bit. I'm going to place that over top of our container here. So obviously we can't see our leaves very well, so I think what we can do is just make a white stroke around them, and that'll help the silhouette read a lot better. And I'm gonna make sure that stroke is on the outside of the edge instead of the center. So just increase that stroke until it roughly matches the distance between our solid shape and our outline. So that's definitely a lot more readable, but we do have some strange artifacting here, and our outline still is cutting through our leaves. So I think what we can do is go ahead and draw a shape that matches the outline of our leaf stroke without having these jagged edges here. Now we can just make that white, get rid of our leaf stroke, and now we got a nice outline for that. Now you notice on our leaves we have some rounded edges on the end of this stroke, and I think we can mirror that on our outline. So to do that, I'm just gonna make some new points along that line. We can just delete this point in the middle connecting them, and now our stroke only goes from this end to this end. And if we set the caps to rounded, so now for this to go in our bag, we actually need it in a white version. So we're gonna drag it off the artboard onto a darker background up here. First off, we'll turn our text black, our background white, and our outline white. We can use this stroke shape we made and cut that out from our solid shape. And we'll just turn the leaves white, and that's got it. Now we can copy this and stick that into our design. I think it'll probably go somewhere around here. And again, if we change that blending mode to screen, we'll get rid of the black parts. All right, now we can just go ahead and make something similar for the number of pancakes this mix makes. Now we can just paste that in place. So that's looking pretty good to me. Now that we can go ahead and move on to the background of our package. And once again, I think this is a good place to try some different options. As far as the background goes, I think any of them will require our pen to have some type of shadow just to help ground it to the bag. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that in. Now, as far as concepts go for the background, there's a couple different things we can do. One idea is to just not have any background at all and just leave the bag in its normal form. It gives it a very natural look, but that's not the most visually interesting thing we could do. Along those same lines, we could have a solid color for the background, something that really pops. So for example, something maybe like a yellowish orange color. And just at this point, I think this is definitely more eye-catching than the plain brown, so I definitely lean more towards it. In addition to that, another thing we could do would be add an image to the background. And since this is trying to go for a more old-fashioned vibe, I think maybe making this look like it's on a wooden table or something like that would be cool. I just grabbed a wooden texture I had from another project just to get an idea for what this would look like. And personally, out of these three, for me, this last one is just the clear winner. It helps us develop a scene, and it definitely has that more rustic vibe that these other ones don't quite capture. So I think this is what we're gonna go for. And while I really do like the wood, I think it's a little plain right now. So since this is supposed to be a table, maybe it'd be cool to have some type of tablecloth on here as well. Now we can't have a tablecloth that covers the entire table because we wouldn't see any of the wood. So that means the cloth just needs to cover part of the table. So I've got this image from Adobe stock. I liked it because it just had a partial covering of the tablecloth we could use. It does have some wood as well, so we can see if we like this wood better or our other wood. I'm gonna go ahead and put that onto our bag. We can scale it up, that way it goes from edge to edge. We'll move it up just so it covers part of the bottom of the bag. I'm gonna separate the tablecloth from the wood, that way we can see what our original wood looks like behind it too. So we can see our two different options for wood. This is a more smooth wood, and our original one was a little bit more coarse. Now if we look at the other objects in our scene, you'll notice our pen has a lot lot of texture, and our cloth has a lot of texture as well. To me, this wood has a lot more texture than our other option, and this one's almost a little too smooth, I think, to match with the rest of our scene. So with that in mind, we're gonna go for this one. And while we do have this really cool pancake mix graphic, I think it might be a good idea to show some traditional pancakes just somewhere on the package. So maybe we can have a couple stacks just sitting on the table in these empty spots. So I found a couple different pancakes, and I chose these because they have a lot of character. There's some good color and a lot of textural interest, and it's not just a smooth surface. So I put those in place. I think it's gonna look a little funny just to have pancakes laying on the table. So it seems to me we may need some plates to put those on. I ended up finding this plate. I really liked it because it has some texture in it, and it's got a nice thick outline that separates the white plate from anything in the background. I have to shrink the pancake down some to fit on the plate, and I'll just stick that other plate on the other side. I think these would look better as stacks of pancakes rather than just single pancakes. So an easy way to do that is to just duplicate a pancake, drag it on top of another one, and just make sure the edges don't line up between any of the images. That way you can't tell that it's all the same pancake. We need to add some shadows to our pancakes. So it's just gonna be a pretty tiny shadow. And again, we'll add a shadow for the pancake on the very bottom of the plate. Now we can give our plates some shadow. And really this shadow is representing the plate as well as the stack of pancakes on top of it. So the shadow is gonna be a little longer and a little more soft. So on this package, the things we want to stand out, like the logo and the informational icons, are solid white, and that makes a good contrast from the background. But right now, the white of our plates is kind of fighting that, so I think we need to tone those down a bit and maybe make them more of a tan color. That way they fade into the background a bit better. I just made a solid color over top of the plates. We'll just adjust the blend mode and push that back until we get something we like. It's a fairly subtle change, but I think it definitely helps the plates not fight so much with our other white elements. So I think we could add some more interest in here by putting some colorful toppings like some berries or something like that. So I've got this really nice image that has an arrangement of berries and leaves that we can use. And I like to put different toppings on each pancake. So maybe this one we'll put some blueberries on. As far as how you're gonna arrange these, there's no really right way to do it. I'm just kind of working it around to where it feels right to me. The thing that's gonna make these look realistic is the lighting. So we need to add in some shadows and highlights. So I'm just gonna go in with a soft brush at a pretty low opacity with a dark brown color, set my layer to multiply, and just start painting in some shadows. And now we need some shadows for where the actual objects are overlapping each other. And we want to get rid of some of these highlights that appear on the bottom end of the berries. We're not gonna get any light from that, so those should be dark as well. So before we move any further with that, I'm gonna go ahead and put some other berries on this set of pancakes too. Now notice with this berry, we have some shadow already here and a highlight, so we kind of have to rotate the berry to where that matches the lighting in our scene. So we're just gonna follow the same process we did over here, just by adding some shadows and shading on these objects. And our pancakes would not be complete without some syrup. So I think we can make some custom syrup that looks pretty convincing. We'll start by just painting a syrup pattern. We can change this later so it doesn't matter too much. We don't want to cover the entire pancake in syrup. We just want a good variety of thick and thin lines. Now to make this look realistic, we can add some bevel to it. So when doing this, a lot of times it just comes down to messing around with the settings to get something that you think looks good. On syrup, the highlights are going to be really close to white, and our shadows are just going to be a dark brown. They're not going to be black. We want the size of our bevel to be a little larger, and these contours are where the shape is really affected. So you can try some of these out and see what looks good. To get some additional shape into this, we can add a contour. If we choose one of these settings that has a little more variation, we'll get some more interesting results. And in order for this to look like syrup, it needs to be slightly transparent, so we can just try some different blend modes and see what looks good. I think this soft light blend mode looks pretty good. It gives us that rich maple color. Now if we want to, we can just go back in and adjust the shape of our syrup, and we can see all of those 3D effects apply in real time. And I'm also gonna make it slightly transparent, just so we can see more of that pancake texture underneath it. And we're gonna do something similar to this other pancake, but just so it's a little bit different, instead of putting syrup on here, we're just gonna put something like a white chocolate drizzle. And that's gonna be done very similarly to how we did this other one. We're just gonna paint our drizzle on. And now we can just add some of that bevel and emboss to it. Adjust our settings. Now this drizzle isn't gonna be transparent like our syrup, so we're gonna need to cast a small shadow from it. I think we've got all of our major elements in, so now we can add in some final touches like some color adjustments and lighting and shadow. We're gonna start by giving this whole scene a light coming from the top. I'm just gonna make a layer with a soft light blend mode, get kind of a yellowish hue, and then we'll just paint up here. And add some shadow at the bottom. We're just gonna put a brightness contrast adjustment layer, make it really dark, and then we're gonna invert the mask so that none of that layer is showing. Now we can paint in that mask and reveal that darkness wherever we want. We have these really colorful pancake elements, but the rest of our background looks a little drab, so we're just gonna add some color to that and increase the saturation. I'm just gonna get in a layer with an overlay blending mode. I'm gonna paint in some of those color tones that I'm looking for. So we want some yellows and oranges, maybe a little bit of deep reds. Still want some more darkness down here, especially where these plates are casting shadows. And we can add some lighting to this pan in a very similar way, just by using a brightness adjustment layer, turning that all the way up, and then we'll paint in the parts we want bright. You can see we have this tiny white edge around the bottom of this pan. I think we need to get rid of that. It looks a lot less cut out now. And the back of the plate here needs a little bit more shadow because the light is coming at a fairly steep angle. You notice the shadow on these pancake plates is very soft, and our pan just has too much of a defined shape. So we're gonna get rid of that hard edge. The shadows right underneath the pan are obviously gonna be darker, and that's gonna fade as it goes outward. We're gonna add some soft lighting on the tops of our pancakes now. And on these back edges of the pancakes, we're gonna darken those up a little bit. So you can see how flat that area looked before, and now with the shade it looks like it has some depth. And for our pancake mixture here, we just wanna add a little bit of browning color to some of these edges. This will help make it look like it's actually being cooked. One last thing we can do is to make sure that the shadows on top of this pancake mix matches the shadows on the pan. So I'm just gonna paint on top of the mix and try to match those shadows. And as a last little detail, I'm gonna remove the tip of this X so it's not laying up against the edge of the pan. And I think all we really need to do now is just to better incorporate some of these other graphics into the package. Right now our two little icons down here are kind of hard to read, so to make them more legible, we're just gonna give them a bit of a drop shadow. And it'll just make it look like the surrounding area is a little darker, and you can't necessarily tell that the item is the thing casting the shadow. We'll do the same thing with our organic icon as well. And one last thing we can do to make this text a little easier to read is to paint behind it with a color. So we can choose this dark red color and just paint that in on both sides. Now we can decrease the opacity of that. That way it's not a solid color. And as for the logo up here, I think we could integrate it into the scene just a little bit more. Maybe instead of just having it pasted there, we can actually make it look like it's on top of the table. And to do that, we need to cut out parts of it to match the wood grain. And a good way to do that is just to use a blend if layer style. By moving the leftmost handle on this lower slider, our layer here can sense the darks and the light areas on the layers beneath it, and we can make that logo not show up in the dark areas. So now those cracks are digging into our logo, and it looks a lot more like this logo is a part of the table. And we just need to find a balance to where it looks cracked, but it's still legible. So you can see some of the letters in the logo are a little hard to read because it's wide and the background is so light. So we can just make a duplicate of the logo. And remember, the normal version has black letters. So if we set this to soft light, then it's gonna make all of those letters darker brown. And we can just tone that down to where it still matches the table, but just gives us a little more emphasis on those letters. And I think the very last thing we need to do is to just put that net weight text down at the bottom. So we can just make that text white, make it slightly smaller, and we'll give it a tiny drop shadow to help separate it from the background. I'm gonna lower it just a little bit so it doesn't interfere so much with our other graphics. And I'll make the font slightly thinner as well. And just so it doesn't stand out so much against everything else, I'm gonna make it slightly transparent. And notice for that text, we didn't use the same font that we used in these other places, because this is really just an extra informational element that's just kind of required to be there. So we wanna make sure that that's visually separated from this other information in that way. And just to wrap this up, one thing I like to do on almost every project is just to apply a camera raw filter, and that'll just give us the chance to make some adjustments overall to the entire image. So I just start by making a separate merged layer of everything in the image, convert that to a smart object, and then we can just add that camera raw filter. So you can see we have a lot of options here, and I usually just start from the top and work my way down. First we'll look at the temperature, and I think I'd like to bring in some more warm tones. So we're gonna drag that to the right, throw in a little magenta. And when it comes to your exposure and contrast in these types of settings, a lot of times I just like to drag the handle to an extreme, and without looking at where the slider is, work my way back to a point that I think looks good. Do the same thing with the contrast, darken up the shadows. Now these next three settings have a lot to do with the amount of detail we're gonna end up with in our final image. You see if we turn our texture down, the image gets a lot more smooth, and if we turn it up, it gets really crisp. So for this scene, we're going for something fairly rustic, so I'm gonna turn up the texture some, and that'll help bring out some of the detail in the wood and in the pan. As for the clarity, we'll bump that up just a little bit too. Finally, the vibrance and saturation are gonna affect the amount of color in our image. So I think that looks pretty good. We're gonna save that. So you really see the difference between our before and our after. We added a lot more color and clarity to the image. I really think it makes the design feel a little more warm and inviting, and it brings all of the elements together. And if you do feel like you've gone a little overboard with the filter, maybe it's too strong, you can always turn the opacity down to lessen that effect. Well guys, that pretty much wraps the front up. We're gonna be doing the design of the back of this package in the next video, so you can go ahead and watch that here. There's gonna be one more video in the set after that, where we're gonna take both the front and the back of the bag, put that together in one scene. We're gonna make the mock-ups look really realistic with lighting and shadow. And we're gonna add some extra elements to make it a really beautiful presentation. I really hope you enjoy this series. Leave a like if you do. Let me know down in the comments below what you think, and make sure to share the video with somebody that might be interested in it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.